ISKCON of Silicon Valley. I feel very fortunate to be here with all of you tonight, and we'll start by offering obeisances to His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of this International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And now we have the opportunity of taking the time to hear directly from Krishna from the Bhagavad Gita. So first of all, we'll look at chapter 5 from the Gita. And in this chapter, which is Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness, we get a sense for how to live and work in the world without becoming entangled. As we'll see from reading the verses in this chapter, Krishna speaks about the way of the lotus flower that, although resting in water, never becomes submerged, nor does it become affected by the water. So we'll look at the English translations all the way through and read them together. Yes, please. And if you like, you can join in and we'll read these together. Arjuna said, "O Krishna, first of all you ask me to renounce work, and then again you recommend work with devotion. Now will you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial?" The Personality of Godhead replied, "The renunciation of work and work in devotion are both good for liberation, but of the two, work in devotional service is better than renunciation of work. One who neither hates nor desires the fruits of his activities is known to be always renounced. Such a person, free from all dualities, easily overcomes material bondage and is completely liberated, O mighty armed Arjuna. Only the ignorant speak of devotional service, karma yoga, as being different from the analytical study of the material world, Sankhya. Those who are actually learned say that he who applies himself well to one of these paths achieves the results of both. One who knows that the position reached by means of analytical study can also be attained by devotional service, and who therefore sees analytical study and devotional service to be on the same level, sees things as they are. Merely renouncing all activities, yet not engaging in the devotional service of the Lord, cannot make one happy. But a thoughtful person engaged in devotional service can achieve the supreme without delay. One who works in devotion, who is a pure soul, and who controls his mind and senses is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. A person in the divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping, and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects, and that he is aloof from them. One who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme Lord, is unaffected by sinful action, as a lotus leaf is untouched by water. The yogis, abandoning attachment, act with body, mind, intelligence, and even with the senses only for the purpose of purification. The steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he offers the result of all activities to me, whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled. When the embodied living being controls his nature and mentally renounces all actions, he resides happily in the city of 9 gates, the material body, neither working nor causing work to be done. The embodied spirit, master of the city of his body, does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create the fruits of action. All this is enacted by the modes of material nature. Nor does the Supreme Lord assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge. When, however, one is enlightened with the knowledge by which nescience is destroyed, then his knowledge reveals everything as the sun lights up everything in the daytime. When one's intelligence, mind, faith, and refuge are all fixed in the Supreme, then one becomes fully cleansed of misgivings through complete knowledge and thus proceeds straight on the path of liberation. The humble sages, by virtue of true knowledge, see with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahman, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog-eater outcast. Those whose minds are established in sameness and equanimity have already conquered the conditions of birth and death. They are flawless like Brahman, and thus they are already situated in Brahman. A person who neither rejoices upon achieving something pleasant, nor laments upon obtaining something unpleasant, who is self-intelligent, who is unbewildered, who knows the science of God, is already situated in transcendence. Such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery, which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. Before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is well situated and is happy in this world. One whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately he attains the Supreme. Those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, whose minds are engaged within, who are always busy working for the welfare of all living beings, and who are free from all sins, achieve liberation in the Supreme. Those who are free from anger and all material desires, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection, are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. Shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils, and thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence, the transcendentalist aiming at liberation becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in this state is certainly liberated. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the Supreme Lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. And we'll go back to the verses with their purports and start up at number 20. 20. Na prahrishyat priyam prapya, nodvijet prapya cha priyam, stira bhudir asamudho, brahmavid brahmanistita. Na prahrishyat priyam prapya, nodvijet prapya cha priyam, stira bhudir asamudho, brahmavid brahmanistita. Would you also give us the word for word? Na, never. Prahrishyat, rejoices. Priyam, the pleasant. Prapya, achieving. Na, does not. Udvijet, become agitated. Prapya, obtaining. Cha, also. Apriyam, the unpleasant. Stira buddhi, self-intelligent. Asamudha, unbewildered. Brahmavit, one who knows the Supreme perfectly. Brahmani, in the transcendence. Stitaha, situated. Translation: a person who neither rejoices upon achieving something pleasant nor laments upon obtaining something unpleasant, who is self-interested, who is self-intelligent, who is unbewildered, and who knows the science of God, is already situated in transcendence. Let's say together. A person who neither rejoices upon achieving something pleasant nor laments upon obtaining something unpleasant, who is self-intelligent, who is unbewildered, and who knows the science of God, is already situated in transcendence. And look at the word for word again. Na, never. Prarishyed, rejoices. Priyam, the pleasant. Prapya, achieving. Na, does not. Udvijed. So the first line says, na prarishyet priyam prapya, na no udvijet prapya cha priyam. So it means that the person who's self-realized would be described as self-intelligent, unbewildered, and who knows the supreme transcendence, who's situated there so, is doesn't rejoice when he gets something that's dear to the people of the world, and upon obtaining something apriyam, something that's considered to be not so good, then he is not agitated. So this is something that Krishna advocates throughout the Bhagavad Gita, that one can be equipoised amidst the changes of the world and the dualities. One thing is considered priyam, the other thing is considered apriyam. This is very dear, this is not very dear. But the person in transcendental consciousness who knows the Supreme isn't affected either way by the dear or the non-dear. So now let's look at the purport. The symptoms of the self-realized person are given herein. Where else did we hear symptoms of the self-realized person? Recently, in this class, at this time. From chapter 2. Remember, because Arjuna was asking, what are the symptoms of a self-realized person? And we read several verses from that. And they're very similar. The symptoms of the self-realized person are given here. The first symptom is that he is not illusioned by the false identification of the body with his true self. So this is foundational, that a person who is advanced in spiritual consciousness isn't illusioned. Illusion means to accept something which is not. Maya means that which is not. And when I accept that, this is the very definition of Maya. So the body becomes very dear to the conditioned soul who thinks, I am my body. And it's the first and foundational tenet of spiritual life to understand that I'm not the body. The body is only a temporary vehicle that I'm traveling in through time and space, and that it's I have nothing to do with this body. I'm only temporarily connected with it because of my involvement with the material nature. But it's kind of interesting how we get mixed up in the whole thing, isn't it? So the symptoms of the self-realized person are given herein. The first symptom is that he is not illusioned by the false identification of the body with his true self. He knows perfectly well that he is not this body, but is the fragmental portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is therefore not joyful in achieving something, nor does he lament in losing anything which is related to his body. So what are some of the things that you can achieve or lose that are related to the body? Start with the hardest things. Okay, job. Is that the hardest thing to lose or get? Yeah, I get a job or I lose a job. What else? Dear ones. You can lose relatives, and you will, because nobody gets to stay here. So we'll lose, and these dear ones, they're dear to me because they're related to my body, and I think I'm my body. But there are people being lost at every minute right now. Like even here in Mountain View, probably there's somebody who's leaving his or her body right now, but we're not so concerned because they're not in our family. We're not related to them. And there's people all over the world that are passing away right now, and we're not concerned. But if it's somebody that's related to my family, then I'll be traumatized for weeks, months, years, maybe the rest of my life because of my identification with the body. What else might we lose or gain? Home. Yeah. Would you say home? Yes. Home and possessions. What kind of possessions? The cars and vehicles. In old age. You might get old age. Yeah. If you hang around, it comes of its own accord. And lose your power. Lose a sports match. That's probably on the top of the list. People identify with their team and they think this is my team. And like nationalistic pride, people think when my team is playing, especially if your team plays Pakistan or something like that, then everyone goes, but this is, if you take birth in Pakistan, I see all the time people, at least in American football, people, they're big rivals and then they get traded and they go to the other team. That happened in India too. They trade them to the other team that they were fighting against. And it's like, I'm with these guys, so no problem. So this is a mental concoction, this idea that this is my body and these things are mine and this is my family. And because of it, I become overwhelmed with the idea that I'm part of this world and that the real purpose of life is to maintain the status quo of this material body. But it's not possible. It'll all be taken away, one thing at a time. So the person knows perfectly that he's not the body, but is the fragmental portion of the personality of Godhead. Where does Krishna mention this, that the soul is a fragmental portion of him? Chapter 15, which verse? Verse 7. Who knows the verse? Okay, 15:7. Let's have a look. Mamaivamsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatanaha manakshastan indriyani prakriti-stani karshati. The living entities in this conditional world, Krishna is speaking, are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they're struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. Purport. In this verse, the identity of the living being is clearly given. The living entity is a fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord eternally. It is not that he assumes individuality in his conditional life and in his liberated state becomes one with the Supreme Lord. He's eternally fragmented. It is clearly said, Sanatanaha. According to the Vedic version, the Supreme Lord manifests and expands himself in innumerable expansions, of which the primary expansions are called Vishnu Tattva, and the secondary expansions are called the living entities. In other words, the Vishnu Tattva is the personal expansion, and the living entities are the separated expansions. By his personal expansion, he is manifested in various forms, like Lord Rama, Nrsingadev, Vishnu Murti, and all the predominating deities in the Vaikuntha planets. The separated expansions, the living entities, are eternally servitors. The personal expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the individual identities of the Godhead, are always present. Similarly, the separated expansions of living entities have their identities. As fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, the living entities also have fragmental portions of his qualities, of which independence is one. Every entity as an individual soul has his personal individuality and a minute form of independence. By misuse of that independence, one becomes a conditioned soul. And by proper use of independence, he is always liberated. In either case, he is qualitatively eternal, as the Supreme Lord is. In his liberated state, he is freed from this material condition, and he is under the engagement of transcendental service unto the Lord. In his conditioned life, he is dominated by the material modes of nature, and he forgets the transcendental loving service of the Lord. As a result, he has to struggle very hard to maintain his existence in the material world as a result of us taking on the identity of a material body. The living entities, not only human beings and the cats and dogs, but even greater controllers of the material world, Brahma, Lord Shiva, and Lord Vishnu, are all parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. They are all eternal, not temporary manifestations. The word karshati, struggling or grappling hard, is very significant. The conditioned soul is bound up, as though shackled by iron chains. He is bound up by the false ego, and the mind is the chief agent which is driving him in this material existence. When the mind is in the mode of goodness, his activities are good. When the mind is in the mode of passion, his activities are troublesome. And when the mind is in the mode of ignorance, he travels in the lower species of life. So in goodness, good. Passion, troublesome. Ignorance, lower species. It is clear, however, in this verse that the conditioned soul is covered by the material body, with the mind and the senses, and when he is liberated, this material covering perishes, but his spiritual body manifests itself in its individual capacity. The following information is there in the Madhyandina Yama Shruti. Which Shruti? Sava Esha Brahma Nishta Idam Shariyan Martyam Atisridja Brahma Bhishampadya Brahmana Pashyati Brahmana Shinoti Brahmanai Vedam Sarvam Anubhavati. It is stated here that when the living entity, a couple just left to go bring some prashad or something. It is stated here that when a living entity gives up this material embodiment and enters into the spiritual world, he revives his spiritual body, and in his spiritual body he can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. He can hear and speak to him face to face, and he can understand the Supreme Personality as he is. From Smriti also it is understood, Vasanti Yatra Purusha Sarve Vaikunta Murthaya. In the spiritual planets, everyone lives in bodies featured like the Supreme Personality of Godheads. As far as bodily construction is concerned, there is no difference between the part and parcel living entities and the expansions of Vishnu Murti. In other words, at liberation, the living entity gets a spiritual body by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The words Mamai Vamsha, fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, are also significant. The fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is not like some material broken part. We have already understood in the second chapter that the spirit cannot be cut into pieces. This fragment is not materially conceived. It is not like matter, which can be cut into pieces and joined together again. That conception is not applicable here, because the Sanskrit word, sanatan, eternal, is used. The fragmental portion is eternal. It is also stated in the beginning of the second chapter that in each and every individual body, the fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is present. Dehinosmin yata dehe. The fragmental portion, when liberated from the bodily entanglement, revives its original spiritual body in the spiritual sky, in a spiritual planet, and enjoys association with the Supreme Lord. It is, however, understood here that the living entity, being the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, is qualitatively one with the Lord, just as the parts and parcels of gold are also gold. Back to the original purport we're working on. This gives a very clear definition of who we are. As Krishna says, Mamai Vamsho Jivaloke. There were his parts. He being the Supreme Personality of God and the origin of everything, expands himself for his own happiness, bliss. This is mentioned, Ekobahushyam. In the Vedas it is said, the one has become many. And why? For his own enjoyment. Because enjoyment means there have to be more than one. And the more there are, the more enjoyment there is, the more variety there is. So the jiva, the living entity, is this eternal part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, qualitatively one with the Lord, but quantitatively we're infinitesimal compared to Krishna, who's infinite. And our position is that we are servitors of Krishna and also appreciators. If the Supreme, who's all opulent, means he is the most beautiful, and then he has many other opulences, which are extremely attractive, doesn't have someone to appreciate him, then what is the use of being all beautiful? If someone's infinitely beautiful, but then there's no one to look at that person and say, oh, that's the most beautiful person I've ever seen, what is the use? So the living entity's position of natural happiness is an appreciator of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and a servitor. It's natural, Krishna says, when one knows one's position and knows Krishna's position, that one will want to engage in service. Aham sarvasya prabhavo matak sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante imam buddha bhava samanvita. Krishna says in the Gita, those who know that I'm the origin of everything, that everything comes from me, they worship me with all their hearts. So this is the true position of happiness, is to understand one's natural constitutional position and to engage in service to the Lord. So as we've heard here in this purport so far, the symptoms of the self-realized person are given herein. The first symptom is he is not illusioned by the false identification of the body with his true self. So he knows perfectly well that he is not this body, but is the fragmental portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is therefore not joyful in achieving something, nor does he lament in losing anything which is related with his body. This steadiness of mind is called sthira buddhi. What is it called? Or self-intelligence. He is therefore never bewildered by mistaking the gross body for the soul, nor does he accept the body as permanent and disregard the existence of the soul. This knowledge elevates him to the station of knowing the complete science of the absolute truth. Go back a little bit. Okay, so we said, he is therefore never bewildered by mistaking the gross body for the soul, nor does he accept the body as permanent and disregard the existence of the soul. This knowledge elevates him to the station of knowing the complete science of the absolute truth, namely, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. He thus knows his constitutional position perfectly well, without falsely trying to become one with the Supreme in all respects. This is called Brahman realization or self-realization. Such steady consciousness is called Krishna consciousness. And now we'll take some reflections, anything that you heard so far from the readings or from the monologue that stuck in your mind. Shraddha.
Thank you so much, Maharaj, for picking up this chapter to read, because I was going to start reading chapter 5 of Bhagavad Gita deeply. So,
really?
Yeah.
What an auspicious coincidence. Serendipity, that is.
So Maharaj, I have a question, that when we talk about, we talked about the sthira buddhi. So underneath the sthira buddhi, there is also a sthira mind, or can they be at loggerheads? Of course, there's a hierarchy, like lower are the working senses, above that is the mind, above that is the intelligence. So in the verse number 7 from chapter 15, it said, if the mind is in the mode of passion, then the activities are passionate. If the mind is in the mode of ignorance, then the act is like that. So can the intelligence come in between and override what the mind is doing?
Yes. And this is what Krishna recommends in the last verse of the 3rd chapter. In fact, we'll find a lot in the last section of the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. We'll work backwards from the last verse in the 3rd chapter, where Krishna advocates that we use the intelligence to overcome the material senses. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind, and intelligence. Material senses, mind, intelligence. O mighty Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, Krishna consciousness, and thus by spiritual strength conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. And we'll also look at the purport. So this is a deliberate spiritual intelligence. Evam buddhi param buddhva samstabhya manamatmana jai shatrum mahabaho kamarupam durasanam. The translation is, again, thus knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind, and intelligence, O mighty Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, Krishna consciousness, and thus by spiritual strength conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. So earlier in the chapter, Srila Prabhupada has described how, and in commenting on Krishna's description of the hierarchy of the mind, senses, and intelligence, that this kama, a result of association with the mode of rajas, passion, or lust, it becomes situated in the senses, in the mind, and it can also become situated in the intelligence. And Prabhupada describes it as, in military terms, just like the enemy is this kama, or lust. And it takes strategic places within the body, and the senses, and the mind. And then he says it's very dangerous when it occupies the intelligence. Because the intelligence is actually meant for us to understand Krishna. But when it becomes affected by kama, or lust, then I use my intelligence to figure out ways, newer and newer ways to exploit the material nature. And thus I become more and more entangled. So here's the purport. This 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is conclusively directive to Krishna consciousness by knowing oneself as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead without considering impersonal voidness the ultimate end. And this is the real use of the intelligence, is to understand this point that I'm a servant of Krishna. In the material existence of life, one is certainly influenced by propensities for lust and desire for dominating the resources of material nature. Desire for overlording and for sense gratification is the greatest enemy of the conditioned soul. But by the strength of Krishna consciousness, one can control the material senses, the mind, and intelligence. One may not give up work and prescribed duties all of a sudden, but by gradually developing Krishna consciousness, one can be situated in a transcendental position without being influenced by the material senses and mind, by steady intelligence directed towards one's pure identity. So that's an important phrase. By steady intelligence directed towards one's pure identity, one thus overcomes the mind and the senses, which are below the intelligence. So that there's got to be an adult in the room somewhere to keep the peace and make sure nothing's getting broken. And that's the intelligence. It has to be preserved. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, Srila Prabhupada describes how one's intelligence must remain chaste. And a chastened intelligence is one that is always endeavoring for self-realization. The intelligence is being used to figure out how to become connected to Krishna, how to organize one's environment so that one stays Krishna conscious and doesn't become overcome by the lower nature. And this is an important phrase to take home, by steady intelligence directed towards one's pure identity. So you have to keep coming back to that. This is the sum total of this chapter. In the immature stage of material existence, philosophical speculations and artificial attempts to control the senses by so-called practice of yogic postures can never help a man towards spiritual life. He must be trained in Krishna consciousness by higher intelligence. So, higher intelligence comes by hearing from the scripture. When we hear from the Bhagavad Gita regularly, then we purify our intelligence and it becomes properly directed. Otherwise, there are many ideas that people propagate for how to situate one in this world. And because they're not connected to the Shastra, because they're not connected to Krishna's plan, then they don't bring the result that is desired by the soul, which is to feel this complete happiness in relationship with Krishna through devotional service. So yes, the intelligence has to watch out for the mind and the senses and make sure that they're engaging properly in Krishna consciousness. It's like sometimes the senses might suggest something that is unsavory or it's not helpful in our practice of Krishna consciousness. Possible? They might ask for something, make a request. They send up a little chit. They say, "Here, I'd like to have this now," and the mind, weighs it out, and then the intelligence, like the parent, has to look at it and say, "No, not right now. You can't have it. Maybe later." Like parents do all the time, as children are in the mode of immediate gratification, and adults, at least ones who are mature, understand the concept of delayed gratification, delaying gratification for a higher cause. And that's really what human life is meant for. Jagnarta kamano nyatra loko yam karma bandhana. We have to perform all kinds of activities in this world, but the higher intelligence shows us how to use our activities in yajna as a sacrifice for the Supreme. And that might not be always appreciated by the senses or the mind. But the intelligence can become so refined, and this is what Prabhupada is describing in this verse, as spiritual strength. One's able to rise above the dictates of the senses and the mind and do the right thing. Ye shastra vinamutsrija vartite kamakarata na sasidam avapnoti na sukham na param gatim. One might remember how Krishna says at the end of the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, "O my mind, and senses, if you don't follow the Shastra, then you're not going to get any happiness in the end. You're not going to get the perfection of life, and you won't attain the supreme destination. And therefore, my dear mind, please follow Krishna's advice, not your whimsical suggestions for happiness in the material world." Other thoughts or questions? Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. We read that personal expansion of Krishna is called Vishnu Tattva, and the conditioned living entities are separated expansions. And in that conditioned stage of life, there is eternal struggle for existence. Karshati was the term used.
That's right. Yes, thank you for remembering. Especially as in this karshati, or struggle for existence, is in relationship with the materially conditioned mind. When the living entity becomes identified with the material mind, then the struggle begins. And Prahlad Maharaj describes how the mind and intelligence that is endeavoring for material sense gratification creates all suffering for the living entity due to his misidentification with matter, which is against his interests. Thank you. What else?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. You just mentioned that, intelligence has to behave like a parent. And, so that, gave me a very good realization that, sometimes intelligence cannot be too strict, or it cannot be too, saying yes all the time. It seems like it has to cheat the mind by saying, not now, later, like that. So that is very good advice.
Yeah, Krishna gives us similar recommendation in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam when he's teaching Uddhava about the mind and how to control it. And he says that the devotee has to be like an expert horseman. In training a horse, you can't always be pulling the rope in and in and in. The horse will simply reject. Sometimes the horseman lets out the reins and sometimes he pulls in. In this way he learns how to expertly coax the mind to come under the shelter of devotional service. But this takes some practice. And also, it is important to have not just the Shastra, but also one should have spiritual shelter under a superior Vaishnav. This is important to feel oneself working under a chain of command, that I have my master, who's an advanced spiritualist, and I feel that I am responsible to such a person. And having that also helps control the mind and senses. Therefore, the Shastra says, Tadvignanartam sagurum eva bigatshet samitpani shotriyam brahmanishtam. That it's imperative that one have put oneself under the care of a spiritually advanced person. And this is necessary for one to be able to have this spiritual strength to overcome the lower self by the higher self. And he gives the description of such a person, samitpani shotriyam. He says, Tad Vignanatam sagurum eva bigashet samitpani sotriam brahmanishtam. The person is who one takes shelter of should have heard sufficiently from the Shastra, has been filled up with Shastric understanding, a life of practice and hearing, and is brahmanishtam, is already situated in spiritual life, has no other interest. And if you can get such a mentor, take shelter of such a mentor, and then you have that person, and you have the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, then you can be very strongly situated in spiritual life and develop this spiritual strength, spiritual intelligence.
I like the point in the 15th chapter 7th verse, where it says that the living entity is bound up as if by iron chains. It's the false ego that actually pulls him, and even the whole world, it actually runs the divisions or the fights, everything is just because of the small thing of one not being able to overcome one's mind, and which is bound up by the false ego. And I was thinking about the other point that you mentioned about that, how the living entity is naturally an appreciator. It's so easy for when they start appreciating it, naturally makes, in general for other living entities also, it makes them feel very easy. It just dissolves a lot of ego issues and other things.
Yeah, every living entity is looking for something they can fully appreciate. That's why if you buy a TV set nowadays, I mean, it's not a simple thing. There's all kinds of technology that goes with it. It's not just a box anymore. There's like millions of parts. But then you have to buy a subscription, and there's how many channels? 1,000, 2,000 channels. And then people, they flip, and they're trying to, what the living entity is trying to do is find something to appreciate. It's like, and they may appreciate it for a few minutes, or just even a half a second, and reject it. And it's like, I can't appreciate that. I can't appreciate. Oh, maybe I can appreciate this. No, I don't like it anymore. And this is just as much as we flip through the channels, we're flipping through many lifetimes. I try it as a bird. And it's like, I try to appreciate doing this, and the viewpoint of a bird. No. In next life, I try it as an alligator. And every life, I'm trying to find something I can appreciate. Where can I rest my consciousness, where I can feel, I can drink in beauty. I can drink in the power, and understand that now I'm looking at the greatest, the best of all objects of my appreciation. So when one comes to bhakti, one finds that object that one can fully appreciate. And that person, that object, is Krishna, as a person. And the Sri Upanishad describes him, Om Purnam Matah Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishishthe. It's perfect. We find flaws everywhere when we find objects in the material world. Even great, beautiful personalities, powerful personalities, they have their flaws. And if we don't see them now, they'll come out later in history and say, oh, actually, this person was substandard. But Krishna is perfect. Om Purnamata Purnamidam. And everything that emanates from him is perfect also. So when we find that perfect object of our appreciation, then we can feel satisfied and we can fix our consciousness there. And the Srimad Bhagavatam says, Savai pumsam paro dharmo yato bhaktir adhoksaje ahaitukya pratiyata yayatma suprasidati. That you can only become happy when you have full meditation on that object that is completely perfect. And once you're able to rest your mind there, or actually feast your senses and your mind and your intelligence. Even you can entertain your intelligence because no one's as intelligent as Krishna. You can read the Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada said if you read the whole Bhagavad Gita in one day, and then you read the whole Bhagavad Gita the next day, you'll never become tired of it. Whereas people, now they get 1,000 channels on their television, and they think it's not enough, or nothing here satisfies me. Or they can get internet radio, and they can get 3,000 channels, and nothing will quite satisfy them. But if you find the one channel, Krishna says, that could satisfy all your needs. So he says, Vyavasayatmika buddhir ekeha kuranam. Bahushaka hyanantascha buddhayo vyavasayinam. He said, unless you find that one channel where you can become fully satisfied, then you'll have to get 1,000 internet channels and 1,000 television channels and all the different magazines, newspapers. Now you have to read the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Los Angeles Times and CNN and Fox News and look at them all. And they all have the same stuff recycled over and over again. And nobody's satisfied. But if you just read Bhagavad Gita for 5 minutes, then the mind intelligence feels like, this is I'm hearing the real intelligence of God. And this satisfies us. It satisfies the mind and the senses and the intellect of the living being. So this is what we're all looking for. Welcome. Thanks for coming. Hey, Hare Krishna. Okay. What else? There's lots of stuff here. Yes.
What you just said, I recall a quote. I think it's from Oscar Wilde. The quotation is something like that. There is no object that is beautiful enough which will not look ugly under certain conditions.
Whereas the nature of Krishna is one of the underlying features of the spiritual world is adbhuta, which means wonderment. And that's, Rupa Goswami says, is because every time the devotees see Krishna, he's more beautiful. And that's not just because the lighting was better than the last time they saw him. It's because he's always increasing in beauty and he's ever fresh. Whereas in the material world, whatever I see now, and I see it under a different light later, then I think, wasn't what I thought I bought. I got ripped off. Buyer's remorse. Yes.
I like the point in the third chapter, Bhagavad Gita, 43rd verse. In the ending, Prabhupada mentions in the purport that how people try different things to control their senses, but one must be trained in Krishna consciousness and through higher intelligence. And you mentioned that we can get higher intelligence by reading Bhagavad Gita regularly. That was useful.
Yeah, that's a very important point. I was thinking as you were speaking, just in general, what we're doing here is appreciating Krishna's words. And I was seeing how we're all living entities, parts and parcels of Krishna, and everyone's appreciating a different aspect of what we just heard. And I liked the part you picked out about how one has to be trained in Krishna consciousness. You see that to be successful in any endeavor, in any discipline, training is necessary. You have to have knowledge and you have to have practice and you have to have expert guidance to take advantage of those. And when one's trained in Krishna consciousness, then one can actually drink the real nectar in life. Otherwise, it's very difficult because the mind and senses pull us back into matter. But the training in Krishna consciousness is focused around remembering Krishna and keeping him as the object of our meditation. Yena tena prakarena mana Krishna niveshayat. In fact, our main teachers, who are the disciples of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who explicated his the science that he taught them in expert ways, say that one way or another, one has to fix one's mind on Krishna. And that all the rules and regulations that are there within the scriptures, some of them are prohibitions, say don't do this, and the other ones say you must do this. All those are servants of these two principles. One is always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. What else? What did you hear? Yes. Oop, we need the technical support department.
Sorry. You always tell us to keep the sound vibration on, and today I was thinking that how it helps us to always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna.
It does, it really helps, and you should go to great length to make sure that you have the sound vibration in your life. In our house in Burlingame, I hired somebody to put speakers in all the rooms of the house. Just like we did here when we moved in, I said put a speaker everywhere. It's even in the bathroom. People come here and they're listening to class and they have to go use the bathroom and they're going, hey, I didn't miss anything. That was when Giriraj Maharaj first came here. He said, I very much appreciated that I didn't miss anything. So don't miss anything. If you have to, hire someone to wire your house up so there are speakers in every house, and then keep the vibration going. That's what technology's for, is to channel in the vibration from the spiritual world. And if you can just do that one thing, you'll find that you advance naturally by keeping close to vibration. And you can also notice that the mind may tend to want to go back in the material world. It's a good thing to note. As you think, should I push the button on this to let the spiritual sound vibration in? And the untrained mind will think, maybe I don't want to hear it. Maybe I want to hear something else. And it's like, push this button or that button. That's your choices. You can push the 1,000 radio station channels that you get on internet radio, or you can push the one button where you have your iPod. Is there an iPod still? Are they obsolete? Do they still have them? Okay. There you have it. Then you push that one button where you have all of your lectures or songs loaded up. And you can see the difference. In fact, we just read a verse yesterday that in the Bhagavatam that says that one who studies the Bhagavatam can tell the difference between studying the Bhagavatam and not studying the Bhagavatam in the result that one gets in one's life and one's consciousness. And the practitioner should be very much aware of this, that I get a completely different result from hearing material sound vibration than I do from spiritual sound vibration. What other things did you hear? Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So I was trying to connect that throughout the day, as the day progresses, the people who work, they keep on going away from Krishna as the day progresses in the work and all, because of the things, the turmoil that happen at work.
Speak in the top, not on the side. Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
Is it okay now?
Down.
Yeah, yeah.
If it touches your chin down here,
yeah,
then you're well situated.
Okay.
Good.
Okay. So I was trying to connect, throughout the day, as the day progresses, we keep on going away from Krishna because of the turmoil that happens throughout the day. And you said that when we read Bhagavad Gita, we get that peace of mind. We find that joy, that one channel from which we find that joy. Although when we come back from work, our mind is normally not in a condition to even sit down and if we open the page and read, we will find joy. But it's not in that condition to even open that, that we are so far removed because of the turmoil that happen in the work that we don't have that desire in our heart. Although the previous day we read and we found joy. So how to...
That's why Prabhupada set up a morning and evening program.
Yeah.
He had a morning and evening program. So the devotees, of course, they were generally going off. A lot of devotees were going off to work. But in the morning, you should have a program to start your day. And in the evening, you should have a program to end your day. At least that. It was what we call the ISKCON sandwich. So in the morning, you have Bhagavatam. You should hear Bhagavatam in the morning. If you should perform the Artik ceremony. It's nice to have some ritual in the morning where you can see the deity and offer flower, incense, and a lamp at least, and hear something and chant your japa. Some program. If you're living in your house, then you should have some regular program that, and it's especially nice if everyone can be involved in the family. If you do it together, like if you sing a Guru Puja together, or if you perform an Artik together and read a little Bhagavatam, even if it only takes you 10 minutes or half an hour to do that, and worship Tulsi Devi, then you'll have that foundation in your day. And then when you come home, you should also have a point where you sit down, and then all the turmoil of the day and the way that the mind is racing from one place to another, it becomes calmed by, now I have my center. I come back to the Gita and I listen in the association of my family, and whatever way you can construct it. But you should have a morning and evening program. Then you'll look forward to that when you get back after all the twists and turns and the turmoil of your day. You have to be able to take shelter somewhere. This is the training. One should organize one's household like that. Can have that. I've seen it done very nicely in some homes, where they come home and then they get together and they have some hearing and chanting session. If there's kids, they can participate. They have some service, bring some flowers for whatever they do, and everybody works together. It's very nice. It's pleasing. Okay, what else? Yes?
So Palimardan Prabhu has sent a text message where he's saying he liked the point where you mentioned that all the channels of Fox and CNN, they cannot compare with one channel of Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah, Bahushaka. That's the modern edition of Bahushaka, means many branch. The intelligence become many branch. So if you give a project to a materialistic group of people, and they'll come up with 1,000, 10,000 channels. I was waiting at a grocery store and they have televisions up. I don't know who thought of that either, put a TV everywhere. I get in a cab to go to the airport and there's a TV right in front of my face. Whose idea was that? You get on the airplane, there's a TV in front of your face. And still, no satisfaction is going everywhere. But then you come up with study every form of human psychology and all the ways that people are interacting together. There was some show on that was about wedding dresses and the trauma that women go through when they have to buy a wedding dress for $7,000, $14,000, and the whole family gets involved, and it's a big deal, apparently. But this is the one out of tens of thousands of ways that the mind can be titillated by the material energy in different subject matters. So in the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Shukadeva Goswami says, Shrotavyadini Rajendra Dhrinam Santi Sahasrasa Pashyatamatmatvam Griheshu Grihamedinam. He says, there are thousands and thousands of subject matters for people who are established in materialistic society. Said, but these won't satisfy a person. You have to take the spiritual vibration, the real thing. And then you find that people who do that, they become sadhus. It doesn't matter if you're a grihastha or a sannyasi or whatever position, if you take to this vrat of living with transcendental sound vibration, then you become a sadhu. This is the definition we saw in 520. Look at 520 again. So he says in the Sanskrit, look at this. Is naprahrishet priyam prapya, nodvijet prapya cha priyam. Person who's got this fixed consciousness, stira buddhir, the intelligence is fixed in Krishna consciousness. And is asammudo, is not bewildered by the material environment. As Brahmavid, he knows what is spirit. And Brahmanistita, and he's actually living in spirit. This is practical. This is observable, that somebody can develop these qualities through the practice of Krishna consciousness, as given through our disciplic succession. Anyone can take to this bhakti and become a sadhu like this. Okay, so now let's look at 21. 5.21. Dare we go further in the Bhagavad Gita? Can we take in even more of this instruction from Krishna? Okay, so I'll say, please repeat. Bhaya sparshe susuktatma vindatyatmaniyat sukham sabhrama yoga yuktatma sukham akshayam ashnute bhaya sparsheshu. In external sense pleasure, asakta atma, one who is not attached, vindati, enjoys, atmani, in the self, yat, that which, sukham, happiness, sa, he, Brahma Yoga, by concentration in Brahman, yukta atma, self-connected, sukham, happiness, akshayam, unlimited, ashnute, enjoys. Such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. So here is the formula for having happiness, concentrating on the Supreme. And the best way to do that is by chanting Hare Krishna. Let's hear Prabhupada's purport. Sri Jamunacharya, a great devotee in Krishna consciousness, said, Yad avadi mama cheta Krishna padara vinde navanava dhamya jatam rantum asit tad avadi patanari sangame smaryamani bhavati mukha vikara shushtam nishtivanam cha. Since I have been engaged in the transcendental loving service of Krishna, realizing ever new pleasure in him, whenever I think of sex pleasure, I spit at the thought, and my lips curl with distaste. A person in Brahma Yoga, or Krishna consciousness, is so absorbed in the loving service of the Lord that he loses his taste for material sense pleasure altogether. The highest pleasure in terms of matter is sex pleasure. The whole world is moving under its spell. A materialist cannot work at all without this motivation. But a person engaged in Krishna consciousness can work with greater vigor without sex pleasure, which he avoids. That is the test in spiritual realization. Spiritual realization and sex pleasure go ill together. A Krishna conscious person is not attracted to any kind of sense pleasure due to his being a liberated soul. So this is the proof that one is in transcendental consciousness, that one's not attracted to the attractions of the material world, to the temptations of the material world. And this is brought out as well in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna says, Vishaya vinivartante nirahara sadehina rasavarjam rasaopyasya param drishva nivartate. So he says, a person may restrain the senses, but still the taste for the sense object remains, even when you restrain. Because sometimes you may restrain your senses and everyone thinks, oh, look how self-controlled you are. And then 2 days later, you're there with your hand in a jar of peanut butter or something like that. Because the senses, they're very strong and they'll spring back. It's not that you can just restrict them and then they'll just obey you. They'll say, okay, you want to try that? I'll come right back at you, twice as hard. You want a piece of me? So the senses are very difficult to control. That's why we sing in that song, Sharira vijajao jodendriya tahika jibe pele bishaya shogore. So this is Bhaktivinoda Thakur saying the senses they're like highway robbers. You know, they hold you up, they rob your car, they kill you, they throw you in a pit, and that's it. Finished. So you have to be careful. They're very dangerous, the senses. He says of all the senses, the most dangerous is the tongue. It'll just drag you every direction. Of what you speak, what you eat. And so he says through bhakti, we have a higher taste because we can eat prasadam. Prasadam's food offered to Krishna, and then when we eat, it satisfies the senses, but it's a transcendental satisfaction because you're taking Krishna's remnants. This is bhakti, the power of bhakti. So this is what's necessary in order to actually control the senses. And therefore, the verse says, Vishaya vinivartante nirahara sedehina rasa varjam rasopyasya param drishva nivartade. Until you get a higher taste, you taste something that's superior, then you'll be forced by the lower taste, by your senses to take the lower taste because they're addicted to it. So one can get the higher taste by practicing Krishna consciousness and awakening one's natural attraction for Krishna and all things related to Krishna. This can actually bring one to a position where one's aloof from the material world. And this is the greatest of all mystic powers. When Prabhupada was asked oftentimes, what kind of mystic potency, what kind of magic tricks can you show? Because oftentimes yogis would show some trick, like, watch this. They'd produce some like ashes or something. Look at that. And Prabhupada said, my mystic trick is that I've converted people who are completely unaware of spiritual life and addicted to material life into transcendentalists by teaching them bhakti yoga. And this is something that practically nobody can do, is remain aloof from the material world and actually be happy about it. So this is the proof to oneself. You have to see for yourself how it is that by practicing Krishna consciousness, you're getting a higher taste. And by that higher taste, you're able to stay in trance on Krishna. And at that point, the material sense gratification that comes calling is insignificant. One doesn't even consider it. It's laughable, ludicrous, like, ha ha ha, very funny. I'm not interested, thank you very much. So this is a safe position in Krishna consciousness. And the greatest, as Prabhupada mentions in the purport, of all the forces in the material world, the central point of this idea, which is what it is, it's an idea of sense gratification, as Prahlad Maharaj says in his prayers to Lord Nrsingadev, Kutra Shisha Shruti Sukham Mrigatrishni Rupa. He says everyone's talking about material pleasure, but he says Kutra. Everyone say Kutra. You have to ask this question, Kutra, where is it? I want to know where it is actually. You see the advertisements and you hear about it, Prahlad says, but you never actually get it. It's happiness you hear about, but you never actually get. So he says, Kutra Shisha. There's some idea that there's some benediction that you're going to get in the material world. Kutra Ashisha. Like, you're going to get some benediction. Listen, son, if you work hard, go through grade school, get good grades, get all A's, then you get in high school, do your at the top of your class, then you get into the best college, then you're going to get some benediction. What's the benediction? You're going to go and work hard now. And it's called the summertime blues. Even in the summer, they want you in there. And there's no cure. Everyone knows there's no cure for the summertime blues. You have to go in and you have to work hard, and the boss of the material world, the material senses and mind, will keep you working late every day. This is your benediction. More hard work in the material world, like a donkey. So this is the what Shukadev Goswami points out. He's a completely liberated soul, and he's teaching Parikshit Maharaj, who was a king. And he said, just look, the material activities is like the activities of animals. Shvavid varahoshta karai. He said, like the hawks, dogs, and camels. So he gives the example of, he says the hogs, the dogs and the camels. The dog has to have a master. It goes to work for somebody else. And it can't be happy without a master. No independent thought. And then you get the camels, and they chew on thorny bushes, and it cuts their tongue. And they think they're getting some special taste, because it tastes really good because of the blood. But it's cutting their own tongue. So this is compared to the materialist who thinks that sex is the highest happiness. Because one's simply expending one's own vital energy and then thinking this is happiness. but actually one's simply expending one's life in an unnecessary way, which is sapping one's vital energy and thinking this is happiness. And the ass works hard for a little reward at the end of the day, gets a little bundle of grass. The caretaker of the ass said, okay, here's what you get for carrying bricks all day long. Meanwhile, there's grass everywhere. You just walk over the hill and you can just live like a king and just eat grass as much as you wish. So this is Shukadeva Goswami teaching how, look at, human life is not meant for this kind of endeavor. It's meant for the happiness of the Paramahamsa. Paramahamsa is a swan. The swan is very beautiful. It glides through the water. And then if you give the swan a little milk and water mixed together, then the swan will drink the liquid and only take the milk but leave the water behind. Can divide the two. So a highly elevated spiritual person lives in the material world but is only taking in the spiritual essence. Saragrahi. This is an essence seeker behind everything. Takes, even in adversity, the person takes the lesson that it helps him or her to advance in spiritual life, and always getting a higher taste, and therefore remains aloof from the material world. So we have these very clear directives from Krishna, and there's none as clear as the next verse, which is 522. Dare we try another verse? Yes. You're all up for it? Yes. What a courageous group. You came here deliberately to hear what Krishna had to say. This is, I feel honored to be here in your midst. So 522, let's try it together. Yehi samsparshacha bhoga dukha yonaya evate Adyantavanta kaunteya nateshu ramate buddha. Yea, those, he, certainly, samsparshaja, by contact with the material senses, bhogaha, enjoyments, dukkha, distress, yonaya, sources of, eva, certainly, te, they are, adi, beginning, anta, end, vanta, subject to, konteya, O son of Kunti, na, never, teshu, in those, ramate, takes delight, buddhaha, the intelligent person. Translation, an intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. Let's look at the word for word again. There's some metaphor here. And we see that yonaya means, it means womb, actually. Here it's translated sources of, which is the womb is the source of something. So what comes out of the womb? A child. So then we say, what comes out of the womb of the material pleasure seeking? A little child named Duki. Duki comes out and says, I've come here to ruin your life. He said, welcome, Duki. Please destroy everything I have and my peace of mind. And Duki says, fine, I will do that, because that's why I was born. So this is what Krishna is saying. When you try to find happiness by this sparsha, then sparsha, what's born from that contact with material senses for the sake of enjoyment, thinking that I'm actually going to enjoy this. Then dukkha, yonaya, then what's born from that is little duki. He comes out. So adyantavanta konteya, then he gives the opposite. Adyantavanta konteya nate shuramate buddha. So an intelligent person, the person who has developed the buddhi, and through this discipline you mentioned, and has developed a spiritual strength which comes from this deliberate spiritual intelligence through the practice of Krishna consciousness as given through the disciplic succession, means hearing, chanting, remembering, serving, and so on. One can develop this. Then adyantavanta konteya, then such a person, says Krishna to Arjuna, doesn't delight in the senses of the sense objects. It's not attractive to that person. It's not calling him at all. So then the translation is, an intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery which are due to contact with the material senses. O Sanakunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. Purport. Material sense pleasures are due to the contact of the material senses, which are all temporary because the body itself is temporary. A liberated soul is not interested in anything which is temporary. A liberated soul is not interested in anything which is temporary. Knowing well the joys of transcendental pleasures, how can a liberated soul agree to enjoy false pleasure? In the Padma Purana it is said, Ramate yoga no anante satyananda chidatmani iti rama padenasau param brahma badiyate. The mystics, any mystics in here? Everybody raise your hand. Everybody, go ahead. First raise your hand, then I'll tell you. You're all mystics, yeah. This is the true mysticism, listening to Krishna speak. Then one becomes a mystic. The mystics derive unlimited transcendental pleasure from the absolute truth, and therefore the supreme absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, is also known as Rama. So I have a question for you all. Why is Krishna known, and the absolute truth known as Rama? Well, take the mic and be deliberate so our friends online can hear also. Why is Krishna called Rama?
The purport says that the mystic derives unlimited pleasure from him.
Iti Rama padana so Brahma param Brahma badiyate. So Ramate yoganante yananda chidatmani. The mystics derive unlimited transcendental pleasures from the absolute truth. You can derive unlimited transcendental pleasure from the absolute truth. And therefore the supreme absolute truth, the personality of God, is also known as Rama. Unlimited pleasure. Okay, good. Thank you, Mukarvind. Then, in the Srimad Bhagavatam also it is said, Nayam deho deha bhajan nirloke kashtan kama marhade vidbhujamye tapo divyam putraka yena sattvam shudyad yasmad brahmasaukyam tvanantam. A famous and important verse. Everyone should know this verse. My dear sons, there is no reason to labor very hard for sense pleasure. Who's speaking? Rishabhadeva, yes. Well, in this human form of life. Which canto? Correct. Such pleasures are available to the stool eaters, hogs. So this is a theme that comes up again and again in the Bhagavatam. It says, if the animals are getting pleasure from sense gratification, don't think it's very important. It comes of its own accord. In fact, you don't have to endeavor for sense gratification. It will come naturally. You'll get a certain amount. And even if you try harder to get more sense gratification, it doesn't mean you're going to enjoy more. People that get lots of money, they may put together a big house and they can pay more for their stereo system. They can pay how much for a stereo system in a house? Only 10,000? That's it? You could spend hundreds of thousands for a stereo. You go to the most elite place, they'll have to unlock the door. They don't let the riffraff come in these places. They go in and you know, the connoisseurs will buy. But some kid with a little broken radio on the street can enjoy just as much happiness. The other person's in anxiety. Is it going to be ruined? Is the fidelity good enough? But this idea about getting happiness from the contact of senses and their objects, it's not considered very well in the Shastra. It says, just look at the animals, they're getting base sense gratification, so don't you try for it. Try to get the higher happiness. That's what you're designed for. My dear son, sons, there is no reason to labor very hard for sense pleasure while in this human form of life. Such pleasures are available to the stool eaters, hogs. Rather, you should undergo penances in this life. Anybody like to do penance? Say yes. Yes. That's good. You got to be quicker on that one. You like penance? Yes. People like penance. When I tell people why we're asking for a donation for the book, I tell them, we don't need the money, but when you give something in return, it's a penance that you do. And it's people, a penance, I can do some penance. It's actually the way in which when one does the proper kind of penance to please the Supreme, then one enjoys, counterintuitively. Penance is in this life by which your existence will be purified, and as a result, you will be able to enjoy unlimited transcendental bliss. So there's a great fruit in this delayed gratification and diverting one's intelligence and senses towards the practice of devotional service. There's a great fruit in that, the greatest of all fruits. Whereas if one gives in to base sense gratification, one gets what every other hog gets in the material world, which is just a temporary titillation of the senses. Therefore, those who are true yogis or learned transcendentalists are not attracted by sense pleasures, which are the causes of continuous material existence. The more one is addicted to material pleasures, the more he is entrapped by material miseries. What did you hear in the last section? Yes, go ahead.
It's kind of summarizes what we read in the translation, that from the womb of sense gratification comes material miseries. So Prabhupada is putting that the more we become addicted to the happy material happiness, then the more we become entrapped in miseries.
Yeah, the more entangled, the more entrapped. And one should remember and weigh the consequences of various kinds of activities. If one is able to delay gratification and engage one's mind's intelligence and senses in bhakti, then the fruit will be very sweet in the end. But if one gives into material sense gratification, base sense gratification, then the result is dukkhi. It's misery that comes out. Who had... Oh, yes.
So I was clearing off my laptop, going through some of my old college content, and I found a video that they showed us in one of the most rigorous classes just to prepare us for what was ahead. And they were saying that either you can go through the pain of discipline, which is a one-day thing, and it'll be gone and you'll experience success, a higher, satisfaction, or you can live with the pain of regret that you never did anything, and that will linger for the rest of your life. And so I think connecting this back to the verse, it also goes to show that we may suffer right now to develop a higher taste, but as soon as we experience that, we escape the pain of regret, that we went for a lower lifestyle. And
that's very helpful. Yes, very helpful information, very much in line with the sentiments of these verses. To see the context of our life in terms of the way that through discipline we attain, spiritual disciplines we attain happiness, and by simply following our senses wherever they lead us, we'll feel that we've missed so much. Yes?
Krishna Maharaj, thank you for the class. What I get from this last section is that a serious practitioner of bhakti should scrutinizingly understand how sense pleasure is temporary, how so there can be so many distractions which we have outside. So we should scrutinize. One should scrutinizingly see how it begins and has an end, and how it leads to miseries. And then that is one part. which is avidya, and then at the same time I should also understand how spiritual life can give me pleasure. So that is vidya. So when I have both avidya and vidya, then I can taste the nectar of immortality.
Yes, this is spiritual intelligence. Consider the consequences and to understand how by investing in devotional service, then it'll come to the highest happiness. If one knows this, very important. Knowing also, as you mentioned, that sense pleasures have a beginning and an end. Therefore, transcendentalists aren't interested in them. Prabhupada gave the example of somebody offers you $1 million, you come to my house, and I'll also give you as much ice cream as you'd like to eat. You don't like ice cream? Yeah, it's okay. What would you rather have? Kulfi? Or you get as much ice cream and I'll give you $1 million. What else? You can drive my fancy car round and around the house. I mean outside, around the house, perimeter of the house. Anything else? 1,000 channels of television. Give you free medical insurance. And then he said, okay, I'll take it. That's some good enticements. And then, but then he said, one caveat, at the end of the day, some big men will run out from the back of the room. They'll take back the $1 million. They'll cancel your insurance. They'll drag you out of the car. They'll beat you with shoes. Then they'll put you in the car, drive you down the freeway, and kick you out along the side, and you won't even know where you are. Will you take it? The $1 million? No. And so there's a way in which this ideas of material happiness, even if you attain something in the material world, at the end, through death is like the big men who come out from the back room with shoes and beat you and take everything away. And then rebirth, you get pushed out along the highway. You come out of some womb somewhere, and you goes like, where am I? How did I get here? He's just by the side of the road crying and bloody, and it's like, what? What? Who? You're my parents? I don't want you guys. It's too late. You got it. And this is the promise of material life. So Adyantavanta, very practically, a transcendentalist remembers that this is a big mess. This comes out several times in the Shastra. In Kapila Dev's teachings to his mother, he says that the living entity within the womb, in the form of the fetus, and it starts to grow up, and after several months becomes conscious and aware of the fact that I'm in a tough situation. I'm caught in a cycle that I can't get out of. Have you ever been in a cycle you can't get out of? 2, 3 people. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. What kind of cycle have you ever been caught in that you couldn't get out of, that you're thinking, how did I get in this cycle? So we got some very honest and devotees want to be vulnerable here. Now everyone's sitting up smiling like, what's she going to say?
When I joined the company, they were giving some knowledge transitions, and at the end of the sessions, 3 employees said that working in this project, people have got heart attack. And I thought, like, it's such an easy project. Why would they get heart attack? I didn't believe. But then another person said somebody ended up in emergency room. So I didn't take that. And then after 3 months, I really felt, how did I get in there? Because I thought it's easy. But now there is no way I can get out because it's such a complex thing, and now they think that I have been there and you cannot get out. So it's a big, complex cycle that it seems like I can never get out.
It's like you're obligated, you're in, right? Yeah. There's social obligations, there might be penalties if you leave, you get caught. Any other cycles you've gotten caught in? I'm interested in this. Srivas Pandit, Prabhu, tell us about a cycle. No? Mortgage cycle. Yeah, you could, like, okay, let's get it, and then you get caught in the cycle, and then things, 2 years later aren't the same as they were the year that you bought it, but you're caught in the cycle, right? There's a lot of cycles you can get caught in. What else?
Health cycle, maybe. That
what?
Health
cycle, what means?
Yeah, means like I got flu, and then after flu, I little bit health got again some cough, and cough, then again something, and again,
okay.
And again.
We can get caught in a lot of cycles because we're tiny and we're no match for the material energy. And you get caught in a cycle and it's really hard to get out. So this cycle. Where was I? I was going to say, I got so into the cycle thing. Oh yeah, the living entity is within the womb and then becomes aware of the fact that I'm caught in a cycle. You may become aware of it, but doesn't mean that you can get out of it. Like oftentimes when people are addicted to something, this addiction means you're aware of the fact that you're addicted and it's harmful. You can even think like, I don't want to do this anymore, but the sense is, no, you have to do it. Like with nicotine, it's one of the most addictive substances on earth. And when people get addicted to nicotine, then after a while they go, okay, I don't want to do it anymore because I've heard enough. You know, I've seen my brother Larry, he had cancer and, I've seen all the things, but I can't get out of it. It's really hard to get out of the cycle. So the living entity in the womb then sees that I'm caught in this cycle of one birth after the next. I take a birth, I die, and I come back. So he becomes aware of the whole cycle, and then he's aware also that I can't get out of it. This Kapila Dev describes. The living entity is conscious in the womb and then thinks, I'm caught in this cycle, and knows what's going to happen. It knows, just like you know when you're caught in a sense gratification cycle. You go like, okay, there's lull before the storm. And then just in a few minutes when the senses come take over again, they're going to pull me back in and I'll be helpless. So living entity feels like that. And he thinks, as soon as I get pushed out of the birth channel, my senses will become externalized again, and I'll be caught up in this whole world of illusory existence again. Just to go through a whole lifetime until I die again and end back in the womb again and again and again. So he starts to pray. He says, please, how can I get out of this cycle? So to have the opportunity in the human form of life to become fully aware that one wants to break the cycle and that there is a way that one can do that is the most fortunate position to be in. And to have the courage to develop Krishna consciousness in spite of these odds and take Krishna's help is a most exalted lifestyle. What else? Yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Regarding your discussion, I was thinking last week on Sunday, Devamrita Maharaj was telling regarding the discussion between Narad Muni and Daksha Maharaj, that Narad Muni was saying that by our own accord we cannot get out of this illusory material world, so we need benediction from devotees, and through devotees' help only we can try to get out of this illusory existence. So it's a very difficult place that the more sense pleasures we get addicted to, then the more comes and we never find a way out.
Yes, we require superior help. This is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught to Sanatana Goswami. He said many things. One of them, first of all, was that it's not automatic the living entity comes out, even if he becomes aware of it. Maya Mugdha Jivara Nahi Swata Krishna Gyan Jivera Kripaya Koila Krishna Veda Puran. He said for this reason, what reason? The reason that the living entities are not able to automatically, spontaneously come out of the material cycle. It's not swata. Even if you decide, I want to come out of this, it doesn't mean that you can do it. Therefore, Maya Mugdha is so absorbed in Maya, and so conditioned by it, it's very difficult to give up. Even sometimes people practice some spiritual process and the time of death comes, but they're still addicted to the lower nature and can't concentrate on the Supreme even at the time of leaving the body. So Maya Mugdha Jivana Hadid. So therefore he says, for the living entities who are in this condition, Krishna in his incarnation, his Shaktivesh incarnation called Srila Dvaipayana Vyasadeva, came and put the Vedas together in such a way, summarized them, edited them, put them in parcels, just to intervene in the lives of the jivas so that they could come out of this cycle of material life. So this shows you how important it is to study the Srimad Bhagavatam. Anarto pasanam sakshad bhakti yoga madhoksaje lokasya ajanato vidbams chakre satvata samhitam. The very purpose is mentioned here that Srila Vyasadeva had compiled the Srimad Bhagavatam. Is that because people are addicted to this material life and they're in the cycle, they can't get out of it. But by the power of the Bhagavatam, so then they can come out, they can give up this life of lower values and come up to the highest position. Anartapasanam sakshad. Furthermore, he said that it's necessary to come in contact with a pure devotee in order to be elevated out of the position of being addicted to the material world. He gave several verses, of which I'm going to remember in about 3 seconds. Krishna willing. So one of them, with the help of our front row and back row pundits, what am I thinking? Rahuganai tat tapasana yati nachejaya nirvapanad grihadva nachandasa Veda Jalagni Surya Vina Mahatpada Rajo Bhishekam. So this is Prahlad Maharaj. Oh no, excuse me. This is Rahuganai Tat. This is Jad Bharat to Maharaj Rahugana. He says, "My dear king," because this Jad Bharat has been through a lot. He's seen it for himself how powerful the material nature is, because he was a king, but he is extremely powerful and pious king. And so when it came time to go for self-realization, he walked away from his kingdom. He had the most beautiful family, and he had unlimited wealth. He controlled everything. He had so much power. It's really hard to give up. I just see even people, they're on committees and they get elected to the top person, and then they don't want to give it up. What to speak of being a president or a secretary? People want to just, nowadays, these kings or presidents, they try to organize the government. I think it just happened in, I better not even say which country. But someone just organized that they changed the constitution so I can go on being the president forever. This is Michael's iron law of oligarchy. He showed sociologically that when somebody gets in power, then they spend all their energy trying to stay in power because it's so relishable for the conditioned soul to stay in power. Oh, very good. So, Maharaj Bharat, he gave all that up. He was able to walk away. He was so elevated. And then his spiritual practice was so advanced that while he was meditating on the Lord every day, what is the verse he was chanting? No, that's another one. It'll come to me in several seconds. Savriti Mandalavadavarti Narayana Sahasijasana Sanvishtaha Keyuravan Makara Kundalavan Kiriti Hari Hiranmaya Vapur Dritashanka Chakra. This is the verse he was chanting. He was worshiping the Lord Narayan in the sun. He says, you don't need a lot of paraphernalia for spiritual life. He was out there in the wilderness, and all day long he was meditating that Lord Narayan is there within the sun. You can do this too. Try this at home. And he developed so much spiritually that there were tears coming from his eyes when he was just, his heart was softening. And then, of course, he had that whole distraction that happened when he saw a mother deer prematurely give birth. The mother died. He took the little deer in. He became attached to the deer. Then he thought of the deer when he died, and he took birth as a deer. Then as a deer, he remembered his past life, so he went back to practicing Ashtanga as a little deer. And then in the next life, as Jad Bharat, he became so savvy to the way the material energy works that he wouldn't interact with it at all. And when he finally met by Providence, this king, Rahugana, he gave these instructions. And the first thing he told him was, if you want to advance in spiritual life, you have to serve a highly elevated pure devotee. Rahuganai tapasannayati. And he said, you can't get spiritually advanced by performing all kinds of tapasya, and you can't do it by sitting in cold water up to your neck, or taking on, sitting in hot fires in the summer. Any of these kinds of severe austerities will not make you spiritually advance. He said there's one thing that will do it, is that by taking the dust from the feet of a pure devotee and taking a bath with that, does mean Rajo Bhishekam. You take a bath in the foot dust of a pure devotee, then you'll actually be able to advance spiritual life. It means you should place yourself deliberately under a Vaishnava of significance who has only one focus in life. And if you can do this, then you'll make advancement very rapidly. Thank you for that point. 2 more. Yes.
Maharaj, who was the Guru Maharaj of Jadabharat?
Well, that's not mentioned there. And it's one of the reasons that it is mentioned that he fell down, is because he was practicing spiritual life and didn't take any kind of guidance. If he had been in the association of devotees and had had some kind of spiritual mentor, when he had become attached to the deer, his guru would have said, knock it off, snap out of it. But he didn't have that. So it's one of the lessons of the story. Sometimes the Shastra shows us, for instance, in the Brihat Bhagavatamrita, we see also that Gopakumar really didn't get much guidance from Guru, and he was all over the place. He had to go all throughout all the 3 worlds in order to come back, and finally, when he got some guidance, he was able to go back to Godhead. And also we find that in the life of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he showed by his example when he went to Gaya, and then he met his guru Srila Ishvara Puri, and he took initiation. Then he came back completely fixed, to show the example of how important it is to align oneself with the Vaishnav.
So Jada Bharat also didn't have a guru?
Jad Bharat? Oh, is that who you're asking for? About Jad Bharat? Not mentioned about Jad Bharat and his having a guru.
So many times the Srimad Bhagavatam is very vague on many topics. Like, it's not like a straightforward story. It's a story within a story, but it only covers the parts that are important for spiritual knowledge. Like, it covers certain areas. And sometimes it's confusing. A lot of times when we sit down to discuss the Bhagavatam, there are a lot of discussions on topics for which we don't have, the Bhagavatam doesn't specify certain areas.
You don't have yet. But you'll find that as you stay in spiritual circles and discuss Bhagavatam, it's as deep as an ocean, and you'll have aha moments where you say, oh, there's the answer to that, it's over here. That's why it's important to go through the Bhagavatam again and again, because you'll find that it all connects up. There's ways in which it all connects up. And we have just a couple more because we have a 5-minute Gita class coming up. Yes, Mukaravind.
Maharaj, you were mentioning about the delayed gratification.
The what? Delayed gratification.
Delayed gratification. Yeah. So also in the modern, like in the corporate culture and all, they have like a lot of classes on emotional intelligence and all these topics, and the first thing they taught about the self-awareness, and then the first thing they talk about this marshmallow experiment that happened in our neighbor school in Stanford, and I'm just going to read. It's very interesting that so in these studies, means that marshmallow studies, a child was offered a choice between one small reward provided immediately or 2 small rewards, i.e. a larger later reward. That means if they waited for a short period, approximately 15 minutes, during which the tester left the room and then returned. In follow-up studies, the researchers found that the children who were able to wait longer for the preferred reward tended to have better life outcomes as measured by SAT scores, educational attainment, body mass index, and other life measures. So even in what
I'm convinced by the marshmallow experiment. Well, that proves it. Nice. These instructions we're hearing from Krishna are commonsensical, and they're things that people know generally. But when we take a spiritual discipline and deliberately orient ourselves to these verses and organize our lives around them, we actually see for ourselves how we get traction in spiritual life, and that is most encouraging, because this helps us to realize the difference between the body and the self. Sundarananda Prabhu?
We were just reading Maharaj Bharat's story in 5th canto in our Bhakti Vaibhav class, and I was just recollecting how it's important not to let the guard down, and at least personally for me, I'm just trying to cultivate that, how not to let the guard down and be cautious at every step, and it's important for spiritual life.
Yeah, it's a good point. Be vigilant, because at any moment we can be assailed by Maya when we're least expecting it. It's just like, in the material environment, people are always looking to exploit. So if you're not careful, if you don't, it's just like when we first moved to Burlingame. I used to just leave the doors and windows open and stuff like that, until somebody burgled our house. And then after that, we put an alarm system, and now I always close the windows and doors. But it reminds me of this idea of vigilance, because when you're least expecting it, it's when Maya sneaks in. And I just noticed that I have a regimen now. I go out, I close the door, I lock the door. Even if I'm walking up into the other part of the house, I lock the back door, because I'm just aware of the fact that there's vulnerabilities throughout the material world, and just this translates to the way in which we organize our lives too, against the senses wandering off. This is an example given in the Bhagavatam that one may catch a wild animal, bring it home, and then after some time you think, oh, he's tame. But wild animals, after all, have a history, and they have something in them that's wild. So it says the person thinks, oh, they're nice and tame now, so they leave the cage open, and the next day the animal comes out and devours everybody in the house. So the yogis are careful not to just let the senses fly away, because although one may have them under control for now, they may come back as wild as they are, and as much of a history as they have from so many previous lives. And now, I was the warm-up act for tonight. Now what we have is, if we'll bring another chair in here, for our speaker for tonight, Shweka. Shweka has been a devotee since she was born here at ISV, and dedicated her life to Krishna consciousness, and at the same time has worked very hard at academic pursuits, and she's an artist and has multi-talented. And so what we have here every Wednesday night is a special class called the 5-Minute Gita class. So the 5-Minute Gita class means she'll have a preamble, chanting whatever she wishes to chant, and then reading a verse, and then after she reads the verse, she'll comment on it. And she has 5 minutes to make her comments, which will include at least one analogy and one supporting verse from Shastra. And then just after that 5 minutes, which I'll keep track of, and then we'll have some reflections. First, those things that worked well, so look things where she did well, and then we'll take just a couple of things where there's room for improvement, although it may be hard to find with Shweka. And then we'll end with some things where we found highlights. Are you all ready as an audience? Yes! Okay, now we bring you and give her a warm ISV welcome, Shweka.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshuramitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna. Today I'm going to be talking about verse 18 and 19 from chapter 12 of the Bhagavad Gita. Like their joint verse. Okay, you can repeat after me. Shama shatrau cha mitre cha tata mana pamanayo sitoshna sukha dukheshu sama sanga vivarjitaha tulya nindastutir mauni santushto yena kenachit aniketa hastira matir bhaktiman me priyo naraha. One who is equal to friends and enemies, who is equipoised in honor and dishonor, heat and cold, happiness and distress, fame and infamy, who is always free from contaminating association, always silent and satisfied with anything, who doesn't care for any residence, who's fixed in knowledge, and who is engaged in devotional service. Such a person is very dear to me. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. A devotee is always free from all bad association. Sometimes one is praised and sometimes one is defamed. That is the nature of human society. But a devotee is always transcendental to artificial fame and infamy, and distress or happiness. He is very patient. He does not speak of anything but the topics about Krishna. Therefore, he is called silent. Silent does not mean that one should not speak. Silent means that one should not speak nonsense. One should speak only of essentials, and the most essential speech for the devotee is to speak for the sake of the Supreme Lord. A devotee is happy in all conditions. Sometimes he may get very palatable foodstuffs, sometimes not, but he is satisfied. Nor does he care for any residential facility. He may sometimes live underneath a tree, and he may sometimes live in a very palatial building. He is attracted to neither. He is called fixed because he is fixed in his determination and knowledge. We may find some repetition in the descriptions of the qualifications of a devotee, but this is just to emphasize the fact that a devotee must acquire all these qualifications. Without good qualifications, one cannot be a pure devotee. Harav abhaktasya kuto mahadgana gunaha. One who is not a devotee has no good qualification. One who wants to be recognized as a devotee should develop the good qualifications. Of course, he does not extraneously endeavor to acquire these qualifications, but engagement in Krishna consciousness and devotional service automatically helps him develop them. So right off the bat, the first thing I noticed when I read this was when Srila Prabhupada said, if you scroll down, he says, one should not be, wait, up. One should speak, no. Silent does not mean that one should not speak. Silent means that one should not speak nonsense. So, I don't know, I looked at that and I was like, that's like one of those quotes you pull out of the Bhagavad Gita and you write on a post-it and you like stick it on the fridge, you know? Yeah, my mom always says that. But I was reading that and I thought that Srila Prabhupada did that and he connected it right back to the translation where he says like one should tolerate everything and be silent. And when I read that, I thought of the verse that I've heard so many times, which is Dharnada pisini chena tarora pisa hishuna mani namanadena kirtaniya sadahari. So it's from the Shikshashtakam, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, you know, chant humbly, be more tolerant than a tree, don't expect respect, but respect everyone, and always chant the holy name. And so I thought that that connected directly to the be silent and accept everything that everyone throws at you, basically, it says in the translation, right? And I also thought that that connected to an English proverb, like saying that I have written on a post-it stuck on my desk, which is, if you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything at all. And another thing I noticed in this verse is that if you scroll up to the translation, you look at the comparisons between what Krishna says, it's like, honor and dishonor, heat and cold, happiness and distress, fame and infamy. Like those are like direct opposites. Like one is like the bare minimum, and then the other one is like, you know, like really good. And so I was like, how is someone supposed to be equal in both heat and cold, happiness and distress? Like that's hard to do, right? So then I did some digging, and so in chapter 7, verse 14 of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Dehikyesha gunamayi mama maya duratyaya mam eva te prapadyante mayam neva tarantite. My divine energy, this divine energy of mine, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. And so I was like, there's the answer to my question. If you surrender unto Krishna, then you can stay equal to both heat and cold and happiness and distress and all those. And so I thought that these two verses directly connect because one gives the answer to something that the other verse says. And also if you surrender unto Krishna, you become very dear to him. And so I thought a good analogy to connect with this would be like the analogy of a loyal puppy. So if you have a puppy, that dog is going to be very loyal to you. And it basically depends on you for survival. If you don't feed the dog, it's not going to get food. And the dog doesn't mind where it has to sleep. Like as long as you're there, the dog will sleep on the ground, or it'll sleep in like a great hotel, or like it'll do anything as long as you're there. And so I thought that's like the same between us and Krishna. Like Krishna is the owner and we're like the puppy. And so we basically depend on Krishna for everything. If he decides that, like, I don't know, like you're gonna lose your job or whatever, then you're not gonna get money and then you won't be able to survive. So I thought, comparison right there. So yeah, that was the analogy I thought of. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
And now we'll take some of the, first of all, the high points where we think she excelled. So you can offer like 4 or 5 of those. Yes, Vrindavan.
She pronounced the Sanskrit properly. If she made a mistake, she like went back and told it like.
Yes, nice pronunciation of Sanskrit. That added an aesthetic to the whole presentation. It made us feel like somebody is very learned and studied in this. Yes, Gita Priya? It's on. Just talk into it.
I think that like she gave so many analogies and it helped me understand like the verse a lot.
Okay, you liked her analogies? What else? Yes?
There's one word I'd like to use for her, and that is what you use, Shastra Sunipana.
What?
Shastra Sunipana.
Shastra Sunipana.
Because the way she connected, I had never connected 7.14 with this verse.
That was very well done.
Very nicely done, yeah.
It was nice too because it seemed as if it came from, you said you did some digging, and that was very nice because there's different ways in which you can connect up Shastra, and that came from what seemed to be an original realization, and it worked really well. That was a powerful point. Two more.
I thought your presentation was really heartfelt and energetic, and that was like the medium of conveyance, and so it really stuck to us. And I remember you used the English proverb also, and connecting it made it like an extremely practical presentation, not just like up there.
It was nice to know too that you had it on your desk because it was a very personal thing. And you compared that to your mom keeping shlokas on the refrigerator. Yeah, one more positive point. Then we'll look for room for improvement. One more?
I was just thinking that for her age, she spoke from experience. So it really felt like she's not making it up. Like it really, as Priya said, from her heart. And she was fearless, facing the crowd and no fear. And she was like very natural. So
Okay, now a few room for improvements. She won't be crushed by it, don't worry. Time is a little under time. Could have gone a little more. And yes? We'll let others say it, I won't say anything.
First, I would like to say that you are very eloquent, and you definitely, I can see that you will connect to a certain set of audience very well. But one point I'd like to make, and this is common among those audiences, that group, is when you speak, you don't laugh at the same time. So sometimes what you speak is not easily understood. So you can laugh afterwards or before.
Give it up altogether. We don't have much time, so if you have one or two more practical points. One was the ending. I just mentioned it's good to have a smoother landing when you come in, because you gave a powerful analogy. But then if you can just take a little bit of time to add an ending onto it, and then be aware when you're in front of an audience that if you're a little nervous, don't let it come out in your body language. Like if you shake your legs or whatever like that, then it makes the audience pick up on that you're nervous. And now a couple more high points to finish off. It's a sandwich.
It was very nectarian and very sweet to hear from her, complete package for me.
Give a specific. We don't take just generalities.
Because she went into scriptural references, connected, gave anecdotes, gave a personal example, and with a saying that she practically implies.
Okay.
And it was very sweet to hear from her that she had so much faith in Krishna that if we surrender, then we can be equipoints in all walks of life.
Okay, good. Shraddha, for the last word.
From the person who was very nervous in the beginning, shaking her legs, she was transformed towards the end, and wonderful hand gestures, like she was.
Oh, she's a natural.
Yeah.
Definitely, you're a natural. You had a bright future in this. Your personality comes out, and everyone noticed that. So she gave her 5-minute Gita class very expertly, connected to Shastra, gave positive realizations. She gave a really good analogy. That was the highlight for me. And she also received some room for improvement, so the next time she'll be even better. And let's give Shweka a really big hand for... So Whoever it is for next week can start getting ready for the 5-minute Gita class next Wednesday. Just let me know who's up.